As the age of exploration unfurled its sails and the Columbian exchange began to weave its intricate tapestry of interconnectedness, a monumental shift was set into motion, a shift that would alter the course of human history forever. Through the lens of exploration, exchange, and exploitation, this documentary endeavors to illuminate the profound impacts of the Columbian exchange, a pivotal moment that shaped the destiny of nations and the trajectory of human civilization. The Columbian exchange refers to the widespread exchange of goods, ideas, people, and cultures between the eastern and western hemispheres following Christopher Columbus's voyages to the Americas in 1492. This transformative process facilitated the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, technologies, and human populations across continents, fundamentally altering ecosystems, societies, and economies on a global scale. The exchange brought significant changes to both the Old World and the New World, reshaping agriculture, diets, and cultural practices, while also leading to the spread of devastating diseases and the forced migration of millions through the transatlantic slave trade. The Columbian exchange represents a pivotal moment in world history, marking the beginning of sustained interactions between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, and laying the foundations for the interconnected world we inhabit today. Animals, unwitting voyagers in this grand odyssey, traversed continents. European explorers introduced a myriad of species to the Americas, including horses, cattle, pigs, and chickens. These creatures not only altered indigenous ecosystems but also became indispensable to the economies and daily lives of New World inhabitants. The main reason Europeans came to America was to eat. Before European arrival, llamas were the largest beasts of burden, limited to carrying around only 100 pounds. However, the introduction of oxen facilitated greater land cultivation and eased transportation. Animal fertilizer also became an important part of the agricultural system. Pigs were among the first domesticated animals brought to the Americas by European explorers and settlers. They multiplied rapidly in the wild, leading to the establishment of feral populations in many regions. Pigs were valuable as a food source and contributed to the diet of both indigenous peoples and European settlers. Sheep were another important livestock species introduced to the Americas. They were valued for their wool and meat production. Goats, known for their adaptability to various environments and their ability to thrive in marginal lands, provided a source of milk, meat, and fiber, and played a role in controlling vegetation in areas prone to overgrowth. Horses transformed Native American societies, particularly those on the Great Plains, where they revolutionized transportation, hunting, and warfare. The horse allowed tribes to become nomadic buffalo hunters, significantly altering their way of life. Overall, the introduction of animals during the Columbian exchange had profound and complex effects on food production, ecosystems, and societies in the Americas. While these animals brought new sources of food and resources, they also disrupted native ecosystems, reshaped landscapes, and influenced cultural practices and economic systems for centuries to come. Yet, the paramount facet of the Columbian exchange lay in its profound interchange of sustenance. The exchange of food between the Old and the New Worlds led to significant dietary changes and culinary innovations on both continents. European expeditions introduced some crops like wheat, sugar, and grapes, yet can you imagine a world without beans, cacao, potatoes, tomatoes, maize, peppers, pineapple, papaya, sunflowers, avocados, cashew, peanuts, and I could go on and on. But no hot sauce, no ketchup, no tacos, no burgers, no chocolate, no fries, and even no pizza. What were the Eurasians even eating before the Columbian exchange? This changed the lives of millions of Eurasians and Africans all over the world. Maize was one of the most important crops introduced to Europe and other parts of the Old World. It quickly became a staple food in many regions and played a crucial role in alleviating famine in Europe. Potatoes also became a vital food source, especially during times of scarcity, and significantly impacted European diets and agricultural practices. Tomatoes, originally cultivated by indigenous peoples in Mesoamerica, were brought to Europe and quickly integrated into Mediterranean cuisine, eventually becoming a staple ingredient in various dishes. Chili peppers were also an important crop introduced to Europe and other parts of the Old World. They became integral to the cuisines of many cultures, adding flavor and spice to dishes. These crops not only diversified diets, but also catalyzed the biggest population growth in history and economic development in distant regions. The world population more than doubled between 1650 and 1850. In conclusion, the Columbian exchange transformed global food systems, shaping diets, economics, and cultures of societies across the world. Regrettably, not all facets of the Columbian exchange were positive outcomes. Amidst the marvels of discovery loomed the specter of disease, an unintended consequence of human interaction. European diseases, to which indigenous peoples lacked immunity, triggered catastrophic population declines, with estimates suggesting up to 90% perished. Smallpox outbreaks were particularly severe, causing widespread death and social disruption throughout the Americas. Measles also spread rapidly, contributing to the high mortality rates among those without previous exposure. Additionally, European European strains of influenza further weakened indigenous populations with severe outbreaks, exacerbating the impact of other diseases. Typhoid fever and cholera transmitted through contaminated food and water caused outbreaks that weakened populations already suffering from other diseases. Additionally, malaria posed significant health risks, particularly in tropical regions where the disease thrived. As a consequence of these widespread deaths, the landscape was thrown into upheaval.
And so when the Europeans came over, when Columbus started by Columbus, it was as if all the deaths over the millennia that have been caused by these diseases were compressed into 150 years in the Americas. And the result was to wipe out, somewhere between 2/3 and 90% of the people in the Americas. And this had just, in addition to enormous human effects, it was the worst demographic catastrophe in history. It had enormous ecological effects because these people had been tending the landscape, managing the landscape, and suddenly it reverted into wilderness.
Moreover, the demise of Aztec and Incan leaders precipitated wars, amplifying the spread of diseases. Similarly afflicted were the slaves, whose transit aboard slave ships often proved fatal as diseases ravaged their ranks, leaving many to succumb to illness both during the journey and upon arrival in the New World, where they faced the additional challenges of labor and further afflictions. To summarize, the introduction of diseases during the Columbian exchange had devastating repercussions for indigenous populations across the Americas. This profound loss of life and cultural upheaval left an enduring imprint on the demographic and historical evolution of the Americas. In sustaining its pivotal nature, the Columbian Exchange initiated the epical transatlantic slave trade which spanned 400 years, from the late 15th century to the late 19th century. The transatlantic slave trade witnessed the forced migration of over 12 million Africans to the Americas. Unfortunately, 15% of those individuals died on the journey, and their bodies were often thrown overboard. According to Jill Lepper, for every 100 Africans brought from Africa, only 64 of them would survive the trip to the coast. Of those 64, 48 would step off the ship, and of those 48, only around 28 would survive the next 2 to 3 years in the colony. It is important to note that these slave ships could hold 400 at their most. Notably, Africans, too powerful to conquer directly, were procured through trade with other Africans and exchanged for goods by Europeans.
One cannot expect the European to mount expeditions in the hinterland of Africa to catch slave or to enslave people. It is coastal political groups that organize the expedition because, sorry to say that, but African contributed to the shipment of Africans in the Americas.
Slaves, considered valuable property, endured horrendous conditions aboard slave ships, with each individual allocated a mere 4 square feet of space. They were also forced to relieve themselves where they slept, sat, and ate, causing diseases. The stench at the bottom of the ship where there was little ventilation was unbearable. Women arrived in the New World, often carrying the children of their attackers. Sailors raped them aboard the ship. There were also many torture devices used, like the speculum aurum, which would force the jaw of a slave open, often crushing their teeth, displacing their jaw, and even ripping their mouth apart. Other inventions included hot coal, which is placed on the lip of the slave, or thumb screws, which slowly crush the toes or fingers of the slave. Sold as commodities, slaves faced lives filled with toil and terror. An expert from a 1788 account describes the manner in which slaves were procured during the transatlantic slave trade. It details the process of how African captors were obtained by black traders, often through kidnapping or deception. The passage also highlights the conditions at the fairs where slaves were bought and sold, the involvement of various parties in the trade, and the lack of oversight or accountability in the procurement of slaves. The majority of the slaves worked as agricultural laborers in the Caribbean and Brazil. Most of them planted, harvested, and processed sugar. One task even involved carrying 80 pounds of manure up and down hilly terrains to fertilize the sugar canes. During harvest time, slaves would often have to work up to 48 hours straight without any sleep. The sugar canes would be crushed in hand rolls and then boiled. Slaves often caught their hand in these hand rolls, and their overseers kept a hatchet on hand for amputations. Given these circumstances, the average lifespan of a Brazilian slave on a sugar plantation was only 23 years. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, epitomized by the brutal conditions endured by enslaved individuals, stands as a stark reminder of the inhumanity and the lasting impact of systemic oppression. As the pages of history unfurl, one truth remains evident: the age of exploration and the Columbian exchange were not mere chapters in the annals of time. There were seismic shifts that reverberated across continents, shaping the course of human destiny. Through the exchange of slaves, animals, plants, and diseases, this era reshaped the trajectory of human civilization, leaving behind both triumphs and tragedies that continue to shape our world to this day.